Hello, beautiful ladies. Welcome back to another Women's Hour where I'm joined by a very beautiful lady, which is Birdie, as always. Welcome back to Women's Hour.
Good evening. Thank you for having me back. It feels like a very long time since we've been on Women's Hour. I don't think it has, but it's weird being back to normal.
Well, our last Women's Hour was in person, wasn't it? That was a fun experience. I'll be honest with you, Birdie. Your real life persona doesn't really match up to how I've sort of come to think of you, which is that avatar image of you pouring the tea. And I know that's a picture of you, but the teapot picture with the teacup that's my mental image of you now, and it's got nothing to do with the real life lady who I met this weekend.
I mean, I'll take that. There are so many rumors, should we say, going around that I mean, AA was the main contributor to this. Say, I'm 6'2" and I'm ginger and I look like Demalza from Poldark. But no, as people who did meet me over the weekend, that is not the case. I'm quite a bit shorter than that, and I'm certainly not a redhead. But I do still like my tea. Unfortunately, there wasn't a fancy teapot that I could commandeer over the weekend.
Yeah, just a very modern sort of coffee machine that dispensed hot water for you to put a tea bag into with a little paper.
Yes. Yeah,
I really can't.
My husband Alex discovered the tea bags were very weak. We had travel mugs over the weekend because I drink so much tea. I had to have a travel mug with me, but I had to put 2 tea bags in just to have it strong enough because they were very weak tea bags.
Was it the tea bag or was it the? Sometimes I find that the hot water dispensers they're just a few degrees shy of getting that really hot water that you need for extracting the flavors out of the tea bag. So having water that's just a little bit cooler will result in a very watery, weak tea, I find. So I never really trusted that. But since we're talking about the event, and wasn't it lovely to see you and Amy, and you met my daughters, and it was a good time was had by all.
Yeah, absolutely. It was lovely to see the girls as well. I think they definitely gave everybody a pick-me-up over the weekend as everyone was flagging towards the end.
Well, I hope so. I think, some of the single guys, they really have no way of relating to children, so they're just kind of looking at these kids running around and going like, why is there a child here?
Yeah. I was spotted by Columba on the Saturday morning? I can't remember now. The day we did bring the girls in, and he did kind of go, oh, whose child is that? You can give me a bit of a look, and I was like, it's not mine, it's Poe's.
Our Right Honourable Fez is in the chat. We met him. He was the one in the Fez.
Funnily enough,
I think everyone should walk around with a visual representation of their Twitter handle.
I think they did. I mean, there was so many people I met over the weekend who've recently messaged me or commented on Twitter, and I can't remember for life of me which one they were because they were telling me their real name, or I was sat eating dinner with a lot of them, and I just can't remember who they were. So if you have messaged me and I haven't replied or forgotten, then do forgive me. There was a lot of people there, and I can't remember faces to Twitter names. Unfortunately, I'm awful at that. So do message me with your actual name or remind me of what we spoke of over the weekend.
Yeah, my policy is to basically follow anyone on Twitter who I have met in person, because I think reinforcing these contacts that we've made is so not just important. I don't want to make everything sound like we're like a movement that has to work towards something, but also just it's a good, healthy form of a friendship to have these friends who we've met in real life. So I'd rather follow just any old random person I've met at the event than some unknown person, really. So if you did meet me at the event, drop me a line and I'll definitely follow you back, because I want to follow as many people who I've met in real life as possible.
Absolutely, yeah, it's definitely the way to go. I think a couple of people have followed me, but again, I can't remember who you are. So just shoot me a message. I'm sure we've met. So yes, I'm exactly the same as Post just said.
And that leads us neatly on to our first super chat topic that was suggested, which was Logos versus Praxis, the theme of the event that we happen to have seen. I guess it was upwards of 6 to 8 talks that we watched on the subject of Logos versus Praxis, as well as a poetry panel and other sundry speeches and things that we went to on that weekend. And we had a very generous super chat from Mr. Nathan Hood, one of the speakers, and he asked us to address the question, since none of us were actually speaking at the event this year. We're doing the question now live on Women's Hour, and not trying to fit it into that 20-minute chaotic wine infused coven session with that we had when we were in person last week. So we're addressing it with full mind and body under our command. And
I'm involved this evening.
Exactly. And did you want me to start off with where I land on the Logos versus Praxis?
Yeah, I mean, we were having a short discussion about it behind the scenes, should we say? So yeah, do you want to carry on with what you were leading on from before we jumped on live?
I won't be giving a 1 hour talk as I would have as the event, because we'll be here for the rest of Women's Hour, and we do have 2 other super chats to get round to, as well as anything else that comes up. But I guess the first thing to address is that the question of Logos versus Praxis in English just means meaning or discussion or ideas is Logos. This kind of memes, getting the theory right. So having these debates, having these discussions, figuring out exactly what it is that we stand for, and praxis, which is, and I guess debate as well, debating with our what do you call them, enemies. I don't really like using that word, but people who disagree with us, people who would otherwise stand in our way, trying to persuade them to our side, or at least persuading them to step aside and get out of the way while we try to make the world better. Or praxis, on the other hand, which is to do anything other than just talking, just debating, just writing books and doing YouTube, to actually do things. And that was left up to the imagination of the various speakers who we saw. Something I was afraid of, which I really shouldn't have been afraid of, but none of the speakers chose to call any violent action. There was no speak of a bloody revolution. The tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of whatever. There was none of that. All of the speakers, I think, agreed that things like January 6th, like Charlottesville rally, any of these events that have ended up being massively damaging to any the cause of right-wing politics in the modern world. These things are a complete disaster in terms of optics. They just make everyone look like a bunch of hooligans who are just ready for a fight and who are full of hatred and are just not very cool people. I was glad that everyone agreed to that, and I was particularly kind of convinced and enamored with Curtis Yarvin's speech, where he described we have a daunting task ahead of us, he said, because to really make a good, positive change in the direction that we want, he said it's like launching a rocket mission, like a NASA mission, where everything needs to go just exactly right. There need to be months and months and years of minute preparations on every single aspect, making sure everything works perfectly. And then even then, as the rocket's taking up, if it doesn't get into orbit, it's no good. Everyone on board dies and the mission is a failure. Like, we have to, it's not like the left where they can just charge into a china shop and break everything. To break things is easy, but to get a rocket into orbit is, it has to be perfect. It has to get all the way into orbit, or it's just going to explode and everything was for nothing. and everyone's died, basically, which sounds extremely like a daunting task when he puts it like that. But I think there is a kind of truth to that. And I think that there is this laboriousness to praxis in the real world that nobody really wants to do. Like, nobody wants to write letters to their MP or to run for a political office, or become a local councillor, or to do all this boring stuff that probably won't make a difference. It's like voting, where no individual person's vote really makes a difference and it feels pointless. But the fact is, I think if everyone at that event, and everyone watching this, and everyone who watches AA's channel or reads Curtis Yarvin's blog, if we were all committed to doing extremely boring praxis, not doing these big events where we're all excited and calling for the blood of our enemies and having poetry panels, not doing anything really exciting, but just nose to the grindstone, trying to get things done the way things in the current system, without completely overthrowing everyone. I think that would make a huge difference. But it's so dull. Everyone is so disgusted with the current corruption, with the current system, that nobody wants to participate in it. And I can completely sympathize with that. And it's much more fun to post edgy memes and Pepe pictures on Twitter, to be honest with you. I get it completely. And I don't know if we really can pull this off, but I think the way I see it, the most effective practice that we could be taking part in personally is just being as good, just be a cool, normal person with a good job, a good marriage, a good family. Be a positive, likable member of your community, like your real life community. This is what my speech was about last year that was so bloody controversial, just me telling people to be like a good person. Be someone that people look up to in your community, and just actually try to do things. Don't just talk about it, and don't just watch videos about it, but actually see what there is to be done in your local community. Fix that park bench that's been broken for ages. Try to manage the now we get into this situation where I don't know exactly what to advise people, because I don't know what people's actual experience of their local communities is. But just look out for opportunities to do good for your community, to make yourself known as a respectable person, who not by not by kowtowing to whatever the idea of respectable is that they're trying to impose on you. Don't you have to wear like an LGBT pin on your lapel or a Ukraine flag? You don't have to do it their way. Like, do it your way, right? Do the right thing according to your own moral system. I guess is what my advice would be, and that's my 5-minute summary of my 1 hour TED talk that I would have given, I guess. Any thoughts from that, Birdie?
Yeah, I mean, first definite obvious thought was incredibly based. Coming from a female point of view, I think the classic be part of the community, be the one person that your family wants to look up to, what your friends look up to, be the person that you would look up to. I think is a lot to do with it, and definitely in terms of having more praxis, I think. So in terms of the logos, I think we all, as you said, Poe, we all agreed, or we all do agree, should I say, especially at the event, we're all there for a reason. We all came to that event because we all want something to happen. We all have this feeling, we all have this need and want for things to be better, for not just for us, but for our children, for our children's children. And I think the majority of the people there were very much aware that it's probably not going to happen in their timeline. You know, it might not happen in mine, but it might happen in my children's. And that's something that I think we all need to accept. So in terms of having more praxis, it does take time. You know, as you said with Curtis Yarvin, you know, with a NASA launch, you have to take time with these things. It has to be perfect. You can't just jump in all guns blazing, because that's why you get riots. That's why you get revolutions, etc., etc. When people have had enough and they jump in straight away. Now, it's pretty clear to see that most people have had enough. I mean, I know I can speak for myself and for Alex when we say we've had enough of the current goings on, should we say. It's probably the politest way to put it. And we do want things to change for the better. But in doing that, you have to take your time and you have to do things slowly. And I think in terms of all the talks, especially, Carl Benjamin, or Lovely Sargon, his talk, I know you weren't there to see it, Poe, unfortunately, but I did relate to that quite a lot, because it basically said be prepared to lose things and accept the consequences, because if you want to take that step forward, you have to be prepared to accept that people aren't going to agree with you, people aren't going to want to move forward, they aren't going to make those changes. And that's okay, because not everybody's going to agree with you, but you know that you've got the backing of the people at the event, the people with the same ideas that you do. But it can be very intimidating to take the first step. And I do think, one of those first steps is getting involved in the community, talking to people, actually getting out and meeting people, being involved in these events. I mean, even basket weaving, it can help with all these things. But you have to do it. And it is intimidating. I'm not a massive people person myself, but I do help with a charity, I do help in the community, but it's just something that once you get into it, it becomes more comfortable. And I think once you do that, you then begin to build and build and build. And that's what people need to do. You just have to take the first step, because talking to people is great. I mean, you can talk to people over the internet, you can send letters to each other. That's the easy part. The discussion is the easy part. But I think the actual praxis is the difficult part, and that's the part that's going to take time.
Yeah, and just building off of that, going back to the event itself, I find it so comfortable to be talking to people who we don't just talk about politics, right? We're not just having like women's hour discussions, just talking about anything. Like the event, we sat next to a lorry driver and we talked about driving lorries, and we asked him like a million questions for 45 minutes around dinner. Before we even got round to talking about his experiences when he used to drive lorries at Calais, experiencing everything with the immigrants. We just had what you consider like a normal conversation for literally like 40 minutes. And it was just great. I find it so difficult to talk to people in my ordinary life, to be honest with you, meeting people and kind of trying to connect to them. It's difficult when you don't know what you have in common, but then when you meet people, it's not like, oh, I know you from Twitter. It's like they're at this event, so even if they don't actually know me yet, we can just have a conversation and I just feel comfortable.
Yeah, and I think the key thing with that is that we're all there for the same reason. So it's the same with the basket weaving events. You go to these events because you all want to be there, not necessarily just because you want to meet these people, but you're all there because you want to, I don't know, whatever event's going on. You want to come to the Steam Fair, should we say, is what we've had recently. You're all there because you want to be there, not necessarily just because you want to hang out with your mates or meet people that you've never met before. That's just one good thing of it. It's something that comes out of that. And I think at the event it was quite nice seeing people that I saw last year, and again, we don't really know each other, but because you saw them last year, it was kind of, oh yeah, how are you doing now? What are you up to now? Just having a general conversation. But then there were so many people I didn't know and I hadn't met before. But because we were all there for the same reason, it was very easy, as you say, just to get talking to them. We're all just sat around having dinner, and one of the best things that they did it last year as well, and the same this year, is there is no seating plan. You just find a seat and sit in it, and I love that, because you get to sit with different people each time you sit down and talk about different things. And it doesn't have to be politics. It can be everyday life or just how their day is going, which is something that people don't really do anymore.
I don't know if it is just harder with complete strangers. I don't know what it is. It's almost like an atmosphere, you know, like maybe it's that like half a glass of wine that you've got in your system that just makes it easier to talk to people. But
I don't know what you're on about.
just to address some of the questions in the chat, the event was called the Witan. It was the event. The speeches are exclusive. They will not be shown on YouTube. They were filmed, I believe.
Yes, I believe that's in order to help with the event book. So if people do want to read the speeches more than listen to them, it would be best to buy the event book.
Yeah,
there will be others included in the book as well, not just those who spoke, which is you get a bit more than just the speeches, which is great.
Yeah, I think my speech, which was I'm trying to find the right word, the nicer way of saying rejected. My speech which was not selected for the event, will, if I get around to writing it and submitting it properly, it will be in the book as well this year. I believe that the Lotus Eaters team were the ones filming the speeches, and for that reason, I believe Carl, that is Sargon's speech, may be available on Lotus Eaters as like premium content or widely available, for all I know. I finally, just to pick up on one of the things that you kind of reminded me of, I wanted to say that I believe that change, in whatever form it comes in, it probably won't come in our lifetimes, and so what we're doing is laying groundwork for the next generation to stand on our shoulders and to carry the baton forward, and they will be the ones who really see the benefit of what we're doing here today. Even if it's quite likely that everything we're doing will continue to be vilified by the mainstream media, by the regime, by most people. That, you know, we're not going to be, we'll never be seen as the heroes of that we deserve to be.
No, but as I said earlier, it all takes time, and I've noticed a lot of comments saying they didn't even know the event was going on, or it's really been going on for 2 years now. And yes, but again, it takes time. You know, I can't believe it's been a year since the last event. It came around so quickly because you've gotten to know people and things have happened in between. And if we keep doing that, then it just grows and grows and grows, and that's exactly what we need to aim for.
Yeah, and if you are interested in coming to smaller meetups that aren't quite as expensive and are, what did I say, just smaller, I guess, then you can check out Evelyn. I don't know if she's still got, I think she's been banned off YouTube now, but there's...
She's still on Twitter, I think.
She has been running these smaller events called Nomos, that's Nomos. Events. I went to the first one, but after that I was pregnant, and it was just a nightmare for me to try and do anything. I may be coming to them more as I become more independent and free from the shackles of my family. I would also really like to set up a similar event for all the same crowd, where it's more a family-oriented affair, and possibly combining that with a more kind of like a Christian retreat, where the focus is not on speeches but on Bible studies and on I don't want to say like worship, because there's such a disparate like ideas of what worship means for different kinds of Christians. I'd like to have a kind of a weekend retreat explicitly Christian in nature, where people can just bring their wives, bring their families. It's not going to be weird online memes or speeches or panels. It's just going to, well, there could be panels, but that's just my idea anyway. I'd really like to meet the families of some of the people that that have become associates over the years. People who came to this event and the last event. I'd just love to meet their other halves, their children. And to have our children be friends with each other. I think would be great. So that's my idea of praxis. It's just more meetups and different kinds of meetups that for people who have different budget restraints, different locations in the country, and yes, basket weaving. If you want to join the basket weavers Discord, you can meet up with like-minded basket weavers in your area who just, I think a lot of the time they just go to the pub or play board games or
they're smaller meetups. That doesn't actually mean they always do basket weaving. I know there was one where they did actually do basket weaving, but just for those who have questioned it, it's not necessarily literal basket weaving.
I don't know what you're talking about, Bertie. These people have been basket weaving up and down the country. They've been...
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is a good time to shill the Roby Trust's next event.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which I have mentioned before. So those who came to the Steam Fair, again, thank you very much for that. Our next event, for those who aren't aware, is the Sausage, Cider and Steam Weekend, which is 17th and 18th of September. It is free entry, which again is great at the moment for those who have a little less in their pockets. I certainly have nothing left in my pockets at the moment. So yeah, it is free to enter. We're going to have a barbecue there, and I saw the barbecue today, and it's fabulous. It looks like a mini steam engine. I mean, what more could you want? It's brilliant. We will have cider there, but it's not just an adult event. You bring your kids along. We will have miniatures. We're going to have steam engines. In Steam. There's a lot of steam going on here. In Steam, and doing trailer rides into town and back. It is part of the Heritage Weekends, which goes on in Tavistock in Devon, not the one in London, to clarify yet again, not the Tavistock in London, the one in Devon. So you don't have to stick with us all weekend. You can go into town, you can do whatever you like. It should just be a great weekend for family, friends. Bring everybody along. We'll have vintage cars as well. I'm trying to remember what we've got this year, because we've got all sorts.
Sausages, cider, and steam. I gather.
Yeah, apple cakes as well. And you get to have a look around behind the scenes of what we actually do in the Roby Trust in terms of looking after the engines and restoring them, etc., etc. So yeah, do come down. If you are unsure about where we are or any other questions, pop me a message on Twitter. I am posting the event on Twitter sort of regularly. I'm trying to do it regularly so that if anybody does forget, it's on there.
Great, thanks for that. I just remembered that might encourage people to go to the basket weavers as well. Is that I met Lambda, our friend, who later went on to become a kind of YouTuber personality in his own right. And but before any of that happened, I met him just because we happened to live near each other and we're in the same basket weavers cell. So I met him through the Discord, and now it's been a few years, and he's actually coming to the next basket weaving event. Is technically going to be my daughter's birthday party, which he's coming to.
Oh, that's very sweet.
So far, our basket weaving meetups has only been me, my husband, and Lambda. So technically, since we're all there, it's going to be a basket weaving meetup.
I definitely need to think about getting Discord, because I don't have it, and we have these events going on down this way, and I think the only way I reach out to people is on here or on Twitter. But those who are on Discord, feel free to shill any basket weaving events you have going on, and let's keep pushing this, because I think it's a great way to go.
Okay, well, before we get too caught up in that, I just realised that we've addressed these super chats in the wrong order because I got so carried away talking about the event. So we will now address the title of this episode, number one super chat, which is a very generous $50 super chat from someone whose name I can no longer remember. But thank you very much to that person. If you would like to have your topic addressed in the next episode of Women's Hour, or a subsequent one if we can't get around to it, then please do send your super chats. Keep them coming in. The highest paying super chat of this week will be discussed either next week or as soon as we can get around to it, and we will give the subject as much of our attention and time for discussion and debate as we can, as we think the question deserves. So with that said, please send in your super chats, and we will get on to the title of this stream, which is the effect of Harry Potter and young adult fiction on young women, which I thought was I was hoping to have Amy on for this episode. She sadly couldn't make it, but because she loves fiction a lot and she knows all about literature and books and things, I thought she would have lots to say.
I might surprise you here, Poe, because of all the books I have not read, the Harry Potter series is a lot that I have.
Great.
So we're lucky on this one, being the few books. Well, no, I can say few books. I have read quite a few books, but considering there was still quite a lot of stick that I have not read Lord of the Rings, I have in fact read Harry Potter. So I'm waiting for the backlash.
I've read Harry Potter. Yeah, that was what I wanted to talk about. To be honest, I think everyone under the age of about 40 in England has pretty much read the books or watched the films.
I feel like you have to. I mean, especially in England, it's something, if you haven't watched or read Harry Potter, then that is wrong. I mean, it's everywhere.
So to get into it, I think obviously it's a worldwide phenomenon, but especially in England, because they are English books and they are set in England, what they always say about J.K. Rowling is that they captured a whole generation of readers. These books are what are responsible for getting a generation of English children into reading. And I think you and I were a similar age, and we are part of that generation. Probably reached probably younger and older than us. I don't know if I'm in the middle of it or what, but broadly speaking, it's kind of that millennial generation, I think. So people who are now adults, who are having their own children who are reading Harry Potter to them. I think the first thing I wanted to say is that I believe Harry Potter probably got people into reading who would otherwise not be interested in reading as a hobby, and that is a broadly positive thing. If presuming that the things that they go on to read after are more suitable for intellectual stimulation, that they are good literature that they go on to read, that they go on to have a greater appreciation of literature canon, that they become sort of just more well-read people, I think would be. I think we could agree, and a lot of people, I think, would have to. I could force them to agree that was a positive step in the right direction, and that they don't just go on to read 50 Shades of Grey and Harry Potter fan fiction on Tumblr. That they actually do go on to read things that are more. I want to say more adult, but what I mean is slightly more challenging than Harry Potter, which I think was. It's very exciting to read Harry Potter, which is why it captures the imagination and it really keeps you reading. You want to find out what happens next, which is why I think a lot of people picked up those books and read them. But maybe you could tell me about your experience with Harry Potter and what you think of the effects of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think with me it's definitely started with my brother, who is a little older than myself. And he had the original books. So when it was first released, when the Harry Potter books were first released, I remember seeing sort of the front covers of them and just being in awe and thinking, what is this? The pictures were great, the illustrations were brilliant. And then when I got a bit older, I ended up having a set of my own as a gift from my parents for one of my birthdays. And as I started reading them, it was definitely, as you say, Poe, it definitely captures the imagination. You want to know what happens. It is a good piece of literature. For those who might slate me for saying that, I think it's been definitely in the headlines more recently because of J.K. Rowling herself. And I'm sure you've been made aware of this, that she won't include any LGBTQ characters or anything of such. Now, I never clued onto this when I read the books, watched the films. I didn't think about that at all because I wasn't looking out for it. I wasn't, I just wanted to see the story. I wanted to read it. I wanted to imagine it. Now, as a child, or teenager, read them more than once, I have to admit. Each time I've read them, I wouldn't sit there and think, oh, well, that character's not gay, or that character's not this, that character. I don't think that, because everyone's imagination is different. Now, there have been comments and fan fictions released, and again, all sorts that's been put all over the internet, with people saying that, oh, well, that character might actually be gay, or that character might be this, that character might be that.
Well, some of this comes from JK herself.
Yes, exactly.
So
I think it's very odd that I think you've got this whole fiction set, as it were, because they do go on for a while. I mean, it was 10 years with the films, so I mean,
yeah, I wanted to ask you, because I'm just trying to understand your what you said about the story. I don't mean to interrogate you, but you said that you got the set as a present, but the last book in the series didn't come out until I think I was aged like 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
So was that when you read them when the series was finished? Because I think the height of like Pottermania was when like the final 2 books were released. There was massive anticipation, like finding out how these books would end.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So the set I have is actually a reprint. I don't have the originals. I mean, if I had the originals, they'd be locked in a safe because they are worth thousands. But I had them a little later, a couple of years later. But I think the hype originally, because I saw my brother reading them, I was automatically intrigued. Now, I used to hate reading as a child. I could never get into a book. I just couldn't concentrate or focus. But with the Harry Potter books, as I got older, it was something that I could just read. I didn't get distracted. I didn't have to put the book down constantly. It was something that kept me going. Now, with the response to your question on the effect on young people, there's definitely a stigma, and Alex takes the mick out of me all the time. It's a running joke in the household that because I'm a female of a certain age who likes Harry Potter, that he calls me a nerd, in inverted commas. Now, this is not true. I find this very odd, but I think you might agree with me here, Poe. There is a certain type, shall I say, of not even girls, boys, people, younger teenagers, shall we say, a bit younger than ourselves, who call themselves a nerd because they're obsessed with Harry Potter. But, I mean, there is that running question where you might have heard this as well, of how to catch them out. And if you've read the books, you know that there's a character called Peeves who is not in the films. And now there is a running joke that if you ask one of these people, oh, what do you think of Peeves? And they don't answer, and it's like, oh, but I'm such a Harry Potter nerd. If you want to be in depth with something, it's like with anything, you study.
Are you saying that they've only seen the films and they're just pretending to like Harry Potter?
Yeah, there's definitely some sort of aesthetic, I think, behind it, that they're like, oh, well, I'm a Harry Potter nerd, so they make up this aesthetic behind it, and I just find that really funny.
We've got to talk about this on another one as well, because this whole phenomenon is very strange. This way that like nerd got rebranded as like instead of being negative, it kind of got captured as a kind of people were wearing it as if it was still being stigmatized when really nobody at that stage was being bullied or stigmatized for liking these things. But Harry Potter is like as mainstream as it gets. Like really liking Harry Potter, it's like these days it's like the same people who are saying they really like The Office, the American TV sitcom. It's like, okay, like it's cool that you really like something, but the thing that you really like is massively beloved by everyone of your age group. So that's not really an individual identity that you've got there. It's just liking the really popular thing a bit more than everyone else does.
It kind of, once again, makes me just laugh even more, because in this country, wherever you go, there's going to be something Harry Potter related, whether it's a trinket in a shop or a banner or anything. There's going to be something that's related to or has. I mean, I know there's. Is it a coffee shop? There's both a coffee shop and there's a bar in London that are based around Harry Potter. No, I have not been. I do kind of want to go
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, no, there's a whole Harry Potter theme park in London.
Yeah.
If you go to any historic towns with like Gothic architecture, you'll often see that parts of Harry Potter were filmed there. Like
Yes.
when you childhood is thinking that like Hogwarts is a real place where they filmed not that Hogwarts is real, but that there is a real castle where they filmed all of Hogwarts
Absolutely.
bits.
Yeah.
And then adulthood is going all around England and like Scotland, and then finding out that like one part of Hogwarts, like the corner that they filmed this part of the film, the third film, that part of Hogwarts is like 100 miles away from where they filmed the Great Hall scenes, and that's like 200 miles away from where they filmed the exterior.
Definitely. I mean,
Heartbreaking.
I'm going to completely dog myself in now and say that I am a fan of Harry Potter because it does capture your imagination, and I have been guilty of this. We went to this was a while ago. We went to visit my aunt, and we went to Oxford University. Now, in the first film, they used Oxford University's hall and staircase as their Great Hall. So, of course, standing there, at first you don't clue on, and then oh god, I'm
Have I been here before?
It's very, very odd. And yeah, they've got the Warner Brothers studio tours up in London as well, or in Warwick. So it's, again, I've been there twice. It's it's something that I feel like it is a bit of nostalgia, definitely. It's kind of like the men in Warhammer. They enjoy doing that just as much as we enjoy Harry Potter. It's the same level. They enjoy doing that. I enjoy doing that.
I think
what it is.
I think the problem is it's the same with Warhammer or video games or anything. Like, you can't make an identity out of the books that you like or the films that you like or the video game that you like. Like, it's just not a replacement for a personality. It shouldn't dictate your wardrobe. I think Harry Potter, like, a lot of, I think, blokes complain about it because for some reason women like it a lot, and it's not like it was really popular among boys and girls, but I think women especially clung to it into adulthood, and that was really where it started to become like this quite annoying thing where it's like, okay, you're an adult, like, you really need to let it go. Like, it's not that deep. You should be reading better, more grown-up books.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you there. It's definitely something that, as you say, as you grow up, more adult women, not necessarily because you can't relate to it. I mean, we're not witches and wizards. It's not something you can relate to. But I do feel like it can be a bit of escapism sometimes, but not in the way as, the classic romance drama escapism. I just mean a bit of, you don't have to think about it. You can just watch something and just not have to think about what you're watching, if that makes any sense.
No, it's pure just entertainment, and that's not a bad thing in itself, but it's just not an identity. And I think this is kind of right, that the grown-ups shouldn't read these books, but I think that's with a huge asterisk next to it, which is that the very best way to enjoy things for children as an adult is to have your own children and to share the things that you love with them, and then see your child turn away from you and watch Paw Patrol instead. because his children don't like all the things that you like.
Something that I've joked to Alex about, that with children you can go back to reading Harry Potter to them, and like, my mum has turned my old room in her house into a library, and she's got all of my old children's books on it. So you've got like Percy the Park Keeper and things like this, and it's very wholesome. And I really like want to just read those again, but in the back of my head I'm like, no, I'm an adult, you don't need to pick these up. But yes, exactly, having children is definitely not just an excuse to delve back into that, but
it's a good reason to do it. Yeah.
It is kind of an excuse to go, oh well, I can read my favorite books again. But yeah, it's to get into this question more, I think it's not just the
adults are using this as an identity, just liking Harry Potter, but also that there seems to be a certain kind of adult who uses Harry Potter as the beginning and end of all, like political analogies and ethics.
Yeah.
They use this one series because there are so many characters, so many different. It's not just as simple as just good versus evil, the way that a lot of detractors will put it. Because yes, you have Harry, who is good, and he always does things that are good, and he never does anything that's really bad. But he goes through struggles. He fights with his friends a little bit. He goes through difficulties that are kind of similar to what real life sort of teenagers do go through. And then you've got Voldemort, who is evil, and everything he does is evil. And there's no real good. He hasn't even got like a good justification for doing those things. It's like his ideology is evil as well. And I think a lot of people are saying that it's extremely basic, like this idea of morality. But J.K. Rowling did not invent this good versus evil story structure. This is just, basic storytelling. It's like there's a monster.
If I can throw a spanner in the works here.
Yeah.
I would say, now correct me if I'm wrong, that Lord of the Rings is very much like this for a lot of people, including a lot of people in the same sort of group that we're in terms of the political side of it and things, good versus bad, and the grouping together, etc., etc.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I've seen more than one, comparison being made to, using orcs as a code word and elves, and we've seen a lot of using Lord of the Rings as a kind of framework to project.
It was very apparent over the event weekend, I have to admit.
And lots of discussions of hobbits, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is really that bad. It's just, you're just using it as a shorthand to talk about what you mean. Moldbug is guilty of this a lot, where he loves to use analogies, and if you read one of his blogs, he'll use like 4 different analogies to explain the same thing often. But I don't want to get back into all of that. But what I was going to say about the one, I would even go as far as to say that Harry Potter has more morally grey characters than Lord of the Rings. I mean, people to this day, if you check in on what the Harry Potter fandom are talking about, they are still debating whether it's possible to be a good Slytherin. Like, the evil... I don't know who's watching this who doesn't understand what Slytherin is, but, people who think... who are still arguing about whether Severus Snape was really a good guy, or the fact that he was basically torturing the Gryffindors in his class in an extremely petty way to get back at his, because he's basically an incel, right? Like the fact that the girl that he liked when he was at school got married to a different guy who used to bully him, and now Snape is like bullying the son of that guy because he never got to be with the girl he liked is extremely petty, and yet Snape turns out to be, in the final calculation, at least very useful to our heroes, and he's painted as a kind of a tortured hero, an anti-hero, you could say. I really liked his whole character arc. I think it's hilarious that people are still debating whether his his child abuse, like the fact that he was a really awful, petty teacher, kind of exempts him from being in the class of the good guys. I kind of think that those people didn't really get it in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is part of that with it, and it's not necessarily that things were left unanswered with Harry Potter. I think it's just people almost don't want it to end. There is that stigma that they do want to keep it carrying on, and they call it the Harry Potter family. And there is something about that I do think is quite sweet, and it is based. It is, you've got that family thing, but again, you've got he is literally great. You have people to see. I know who that is. You have a group of people together for the same reason, much the same as we come together for the things we believe in. So there are actually connections there that we don't even realise.
I was thinking about this question for because I knew we were going to have to talk about it this week, and I was thinking, how they're always writing, like you say, people don't want the story to end, so they write these like fan fictions where the story continues with whatever thing they want to happening next. And if I was to write a Harry Potter fan fiction, I would write about I would try to like put an elite theory framework onto the Death Eaters and Voldemort, because it's never really established. Obviously J.K. Rowling, she's never read Populist Delusion, so she doesn't really understand the circulation of elites, and it's not really described exactly how Voldemort is able to conscript, to recruit Death Eaters. How is this network still like allowed to exist, and what is his actual plan for taking over? Like, he's like, okay, we need to attack Hogwarts and kill wizards who disagree with us. Like, he hasn't really got an actual plan for how to replace the elite structure. Maybe I need to read those books again, but what I would do
I'm not going to say that there is a bit of deep lore behind this, but there is a bit of deep lore behind this, and I'm not going to go into it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a lot of details that are missed out in the films, including things, the little bits here and there, including how Voldemort sort of recruits these people, in terms of it being either passed down in the families. So the Malfoy family is a big. So if anybody doesn't know what on earth I'm talking about,
just go for it. Forget those people.
It's really bad now. For once, it's going to be me talking about something that people have no idea.
I know Draco Malfoy gets kind of brought into it by his dad.
Yeah, absolutely.
It runs in the family.
There are nods to his grandfather being a Death Eater, and so on, and it goes on and on and on. And it is definitely a family structure. So, I mean, with the Death Eaters, there's a lot to do with. So, I'm trying to explain this in the easiest way possible. With Sirius Black, for instance, so Harry's uncle, he was a Death Eater, but he basically left them because he didn't think it was right. So, and that was because he was related. He was one of them. It ran in the blood, etc. And it goes on, and it's basically a huge tree. And not to say there's interbreeding involved, but I do think there is a slight bit of interbreeding involved. Again, with little details in the book that J.K. does actually put quite a lot of detail. But as an adult, you understand more. Whereas as a child, you just think, oh, well, that's Harry's uncle. And then you realise that actually he's related to Bellatrix Lestrange. He's related to the Malfoys, which also means that Harry is related to the Malfoys, which it kind of messes things up completely.
Okay.
If that makes any sense whatsoever.
It does make sense. I didn't mean to get so much into it, the actual plot of Harry Potter, but the point is that I'd like to read a version of Harry Potter where Voldemort had at least some sympathetic, what's the word? Some motivations, some ideology that was at least a little bit tempting to the reader. Something that you could kind of justify why he's doing this. Why does he care so much about mudbloods or whatever? It's like,
not just the whole leaning on the orphan story and just going.
He had a bad childhood, whatever. It's just like racial purity or whatever. I would have like several page monologues of Voldemort talking about how what if mudbloods in the Wizarding universe actually did have like a detrimental effect on the magic user, Witchard and Wizarding world. What if like interbreeding with mudbloods and whatever was actually it actually did have a negative effect, and this is what Voldemort is trying to prevent
he wants the purebloods, so he wants
by tyrannical. Yeah, but it's never like that. But there is no reason to be pureblood. It's just complete like fantasy. But
it's basically like the Nazi regime.
Exactly, it's like
purebloods.
It's just as simple as that. But the the Nazi regime was a few degrees more complex than just Voldemort, who's I just don't like him.
Yeah. It's not just a case of let's have the Aryan race, and I don't I don't want anybody with brown eyes. They all have to have blue eyes and blonde hair.
Yeah.
With Voldemort, it's similar, along the same lines. Is probably the easiest way to understand it. But
Well, anyway, any
I
more to say
thought,
about Harry Potter? Should we only got 5 minutes if we're doing an hour, but I do want to get to our last question of the.
yes,
I want
think
to
we
get
can
all
do
these
that
super
one.
chats swept away so that we can get some new super chats in. Can you remember what our last one was? It's do children actually need school? What do they learn that they can carry on in life? What can't they learn from the internet?
Yeah, I
You want to
really
start
like
with
this
this?
question. Because it definitely relates to what we've spoken about before, and it kind of relates to what I was talking to Radlib about as well. In terms of school, we've spoken about the education system, especially in England, on Women's Hour before, and I think it's failing our children. I honestly do. I think it's terrible. I hated school when I was a child. Because I didn't learn anything. That nothing that I learned in school has been useful. The things that I use now are things that I learned from my parents or from my surroundings or just from my jobs. People who met me over the weekend already know, but I was saying that I started work at the age of 14. Now, I was still at school. I'm not a Victorian child who went to school only 2 days a week. I started work at 14. I started working on weekends. And then more during the holidays, of course. But I learned more from doing that than I did actually at school. Even simple things, just how to cook, how to look after the animals, how to look after. Because again, this is going to throw a big spanner in the works now. The work I was doing from the age of 14 to 18, 19. If anybody knows sort of living history museums in this country, so we've got Lists Hill, we've got the Black Country Living Museum is a big one.
Is a living museum the one where you've got people in costumes walking around pretending to be from old times?
Basically, yeah. Some of them are a bit more involved. So they do actually do demonstrations, they do talks, they tell you the facts, and etc. etc. That's what I used to do. So I worked in a Victorian mining village, which actually happens to be the village next door to the one I grew up in. So in terms of being very close, it was quite funny. I used to walk across a couple of fields to get there. But everything I learned there, just speaking to people, learning facts about how people used to live, has weirdly really helped me now. I've learned a lot from working there, more so than I should have learned in school. My school was basically full of reprobates and people who didn't want to be there. Students do not want to learn nowadays. In my opinion, I feel like they think they're forced to be there. They have to go to school. They have to learn this. They have to learn that. And they don't want to. Whereas, 50, 60 years ago, well, perhaps a little more, students wanted to go to school because they knew that having a high education was actually going to help them. Now, in these days, having a high education means not an awful lot. You can go to university and not have a job afterwards for a good 5 years after.
Or ever.
Or ever, exactly. And I do think it's a bit of a gimmick, really, because you're learning all these incredible things, and then what are you supposed to do afterwards? In terms of apprenticeships, especially, apprenticeships, I think, are a good thing. However, they do not pay enough, and they are not possible. I mean, I had the choice to do an apprenticeship, but I couldn't do it because I couldn't afford to. That was the simple answer of it. And I was talking to I think his name was Matt, if he's listening. He was asking why I didn't go on with the fashion movement, etc. After college, and I simply told him because I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to move up country and do an apprenticeship, or I just physically couldn't afford to move up country and live on my own at the time, in order to carry on my education, which is a shame, because I think it's the same issue now, is that students can't afford it, and it's just not fair on anybody. They're not learning the key aspects to what they need to learn for life anymore. It used to just be very simple reading, writing, arithmetic. There used to be religion. I mean, I went to a Catholic school. My primary school was Church of England school for a while when I was there, and I remember singing hymns and learning about the Bible in primary school.
Yeah.
I learned more in primary school than I did in secondary school.
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
Which still amazes me. Secondary school, I barely remember anything I learned from secondary because I didn't enjoy it, and I didn't feel like I wanted to be there. I didn't want to learn, and that's a main issue. And as the question was saying, all you have to do now is go on the internet. But the issue with the internet is that you don't know what's true and you don't know what's false. I think you have to do a lot more digging. You have to do
The same is true of schools these days, Bertie, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
haven't noticed. Sorry, go on.
With some of the teachers that are there now, yes.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think you have to do a lot more research, a lot more digging to figure out and to actually find out what you're looking to find on the internet, what information you're trying to dig up. It does take a lot more effort. So either way, both is broken. Education in general is become very difficult when in reality it doesn't need to be.
Well, let me tell you my theory. Thanks for that, Bertie. I think you've resonated a lot with what I was thinking, but also I'll tell you what school is for, because you're absolutely right that it's not to prepare you for work and it's not to prepare you for the world or to actually teach you things. Yeah. My theory is that school is just a babysitting service for for parents who want to go back to work. So for mums who want to work, they can go out and be productive in the economy instead of having to basically just babysit their children at home. Their children can go out and ostensibly learn some skills. I do think it's beneficial that children should be taught to read and to count numbers, to multiply and divide, add and subtract, basic stuff that is actually useful in the world. And that they, whether it's in school or at home, these skills are kind of essential in the modern economy. And furthermore, there are definitely jobs that require a higher level of education for students who are disposed to that level of abstract thinking, to abstract problem solving. There's a lot that you can learn from school. There really is no other way to learn it other than to sit at a desk, read books, do problem solving, write essays, to really study things, in a controlled environment, not that you can't learn on the job. I think the trouble is that without the rigid class structure that we used to have, where working class people would have working class kids who went on to get working class jobs, they knew what their kids would need to know, so they taught them that. And they might even know the specific industry that their kids were going to work in, so they would just teach them, okay, well, here's what you need to know to be an ironmonger, here's what you need to know to be a baker. And mothers would teach their daughters, this is what you need to know to tend a household, to grow vegetables, to cook, to raise children, to even milk a cow or whatever they were doing. They would learn just directly from their parents, because that's what their parents were doing all day, and they didn't have anywhere else to send their kids, so their kids would just be underfoot learning from their parents directly, in the working class at least. And then the upper classes were the ones who were sitting down and doing they're learning Greek and Latin and arithmetic and all these things that would actually possibly be used, maybe not Latin, but things that were needed to fit into that strata of society. These days, everyone needs to learn everything because nobody's destiny is predetermined, and it doesn't matter where you come from, you can go on to be an astronaut or a surgeon. So everybody needs to be educated as if they might one day pick up surgery as a profession.
As harsh as it sounds, and I will probably get a bit backlash for this, but the class system actually had a lot to answer for, and it wasn't always necessarily a bad thing, because now everyone's aiming for the same thing, but because of that, they don't know what they're aiming for. They don't know what they're going. Everyone's just scattered. They're all learning the same.
Awfully scattered.
They're all learning the same thing. To what purpose? To what goal? I don't even think the teachers know what.
It's for equality. That's everyone needs to learn the same thing, even if it's called crap.
Equality, and I mean, we all know there are different levels of IQ, there's different levels of education in general. Some people are more able to do things than others, and that's just how it's always been. So I don't think it's fair to push everybody to learn the same thing when they're physically not capable of doing it. But the people who aren't as capable might be way more capable at doing something else. So
yeah, well, those kids, they know they don't want to be there.
yeah.
Right? People like you who are just like, get me out of here. I want to be doing something practical in the real world.
Yeah.
That's I think a lot of the students who really do not want to be there, they don't want to be learning this stuff. They're not predisposed to want to sit at a desk and just sit be told by by a teacher at the front, 2 + 2 = 4.
I mean, people might have noticed at the event I was getting very tetchy after a while because I was sitting doing nothing. Yes, I was listening, but I had nothing to do. And Poe, you missed it, but I was spotted by a few in Carl's or Sargon's speech. I sat right at the back and I had my knitting out because I needed something to do.
That is based. No, that's great.
Because
exactly.
the one of the talks I remembered the most was Sargon's, because I was doing something. I had my hands engaged, so therefore my brain was engaged.
Absolutely. I don't want to get people getting mad at me for for stepping into medical diagnoses and things, but I think it is notable that these days that a lot of children are being diagnosed with ADHD, a lot of adults as well, because they have difficulty focusing on one task quietly, without any trying to ignore all the distractions in the modern world and just sit down and focus on one task. They're just not predisposed to be able to do that. And because doing that is so essential to modern education and a lot of modern jobs, the fact that you're not able to do that is now medicalized as a defect that needs to be treated with medication, which I think is a real tragedy.
It is, and what they're not weighing into that is that you look at the education from, let's say, Victorian times to now. Victorian times, you might have one piece of homework. Now, I used to get told off constantly for not doing my homework. So my answer to all of the teachers would be, yes, but you've given me homework. You've given me homework. I did 12 subjects at school. Okay, so I would get 12 bits of homework every week. Now, I say every 4 days or so. So each piece they were saying, oh, well, this should only take you a couple of hours. Now, a couple of hours, you times that by 12. So you don't actually physically have the time in a day to get it all done. And they don't think about it. They expect you to be able to do it all. And yes, there are students who can do that, and there are adults who can do that. But the ones who can't, they're like, oh, I'm going to put a label on that now. You can't do it. And they expect you to be of the same standard as everybody else. And as soon as you're not, that's it. They'll put a label on it. They'll say you're this, they'll say you're that. When actually, that's not the case. I'm just more of a practical person who doesn't like staring at a wall all day.
Yeah. I think it's really it really is quite cruel what they do to students, and you do get the students who like doing that sort of thing, and one day they're going to grow up to be a dentist or a computer programmer, and that's great for them, honestly. But it's just if you're destined to one day grow up and be a mother who part-times in a local supermarket or in a bakery, or just if your job that you have and you're being a carer, these are all really important jobs. Someone needs to be doing these jobs. If if you're a builder or a plumber, or a taxi driver, or there's loads and loads of jobs that are really essential. We shouldn't be looking down on these people who do these jobs, and yet the education system is just it just keeps them in trapped, basically legally required to finish education before they're even allowed to pursue skills that will help them in their eventual career. They're not allowed to go out and try to work in their dad's shop or
absolutely.
Whatever.
And I remember in school that it was frowned upon to be any of those listed below. They would say, oh, you don't want to grow up and be a cleaner. Oh, that's exactly what I was for a few years. and I was looked down upon by everybody. But
Yeah.
those who were trying to get higher jobs, they had no money, they were struggling, they were depressed, and I was like, well, I've got money and I've just bought myself a house. So it does go to show that actually bugger what everybody else thinks and get on with it. But
Yeah.
what you were saying a moment ago is giving people labels, Poe. On the flip side of that is that, unfortunately, because the education system is so bad, parents have, I've known parents too, unfortunately, to try and get their children diagnosed for, let's say, ADHD, to get them better education. Because if you give them a label, then suddenly the school has to do something about it, and they have to pay more attention to that student. They have to help them more, and that ends up, bumping them up the line. Whereas, as again we've covered on here before, if you've got one teacher to a class of 30, they're not paying attention. They're not getting the one-to-one attention they need. They're not being helped. They're being seen as the same as their peers. You have to be on a level ground with everybody in that class, when that's not a good way to go at all.
Yeah, I think when you get a diagnosis, it's used as an excuse not just for the student themselves, but for the teachers, for the parents. They go, "Oh, thank goodness, I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just that I have this thing wrong with me."
Yeah.
They just go, well, we would try and teach him in a class, in making him sit down, and he wasn't any good at that because of his ADHD. So that wasn't my fault for having a boring class. That was
Yeah.
that was all on him and his weird brain.
Yeah.
I think it's just, that, like I'm saying about the babysitting service, the school, the way that they teach is designed around the fact that you need to have this economy of scale, meaning that you've got one teacher with 30 students, and you can pack a lot of students into a school that way. You need a few administrators and a head teacher and all of that other stuff. Like, you need a few dozen adults to take care of a few hundred children. But that is a lot. There's a much higher quantity of children being put out of harm's way, than if they were at home being getting in the way of their parents directly, and needing, and as jobs became less home based and you needed to actually leave the home to go to the office, or travel several miles to your job.
Yeah,
You can't just leave
absolutely.
your kids at home. They've got to go somewhere. And the structure of the school, where you have classes and you have a teacher at the front, that is not designed to be best for education. That's designed to be the most efficient for adult to student ratio and for space ratio. That's the reason they don't have teachers taking you around outdoors and looking at things and going places and actually doing things, because that's all that all requires like time and money and organization. When to go to the same classroom every day and look at some books that you can keep in a cupboard in that room, that's extremely efficient from a perspective of just giving all these people something to do for a whole day before they can go home and get in their parents' way again.
Yeah, absolutely. And 2 points on that is that you sort of touched on it, but in terms of the parents having babysitting service, they almost have to now. There are, again, we touched on it before, there are cases where they don't have a choice but to go to work. Both parents have to work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is actually normal in today's society. For anybody who's about to yell at me in the comments, I'm waiting for it. But it is just how it is nowadays, unfortunately. When I was growing up, both my parents worked. It's not that they didn't have time for us or anything like that. It was just a case that they had to, in order to run the house and home. That's how it is. And I've said it before, myself and Alex both work because we have to. The government has ruined us. We know this. This country is screwed. We have already established this. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is in terms of working. And I think we all do believe we want this to change. We want to be able to. I know the majority of us want to be able to homeschool. And I hope you don't mind me saying, Poe. I think you shared some opinions with myself about wanting to homeschool, but it's a case of it might not be possible. which is the case for basically every woman, I think, in this country at the moment, is that I certainly want to homeschool, but the reality that actually being able is going to be very, very difficult. And on the other point that you said about being able to sit in a classroom and learn from books, when I was at school, and I think it's certainly the same now, there weren't many books, which really annoyed me. I mean, we had textbooks, but there weren't any. I mean, these textbooks, I hated them. I absolutely hated them. They were just full of questions and things that did not interest me. Whereas now, I mean, at home, I have more books than my school did. I mean, I own the full children's encyclopedia set. I mean, it's quite a hefty lot of books. I was very, very lucky on getting those because somebody was getting rid of them, and we got them for a very nice little bargain, should I say? Because if anybody knows the children's encyclopedias, if you ever find them, do grab them. I mean, there's so many wholesome things in there, but if anybody does want to homeschool or is looking into homeschooling, or even when it comes to helping your children with their homework, other than the monetary system being different in the books, there are some very, very useful things in there about absolutely everything and anything. You can open any of the pages, and it's both for teachers or parents and for children. It helps both, which is something that we are lacking now, I think. And being able to have something physical to look at, hold, read, in my opinion, certainly helps with education. Because if you sit in front of a board and stare at it, I don't know about yourself, Pro, but I don't. That does not engage me at all. I'm staring at a blank screen for all I can see.
I don't think anyone thinks school is fun. You know, like there's the real life Lisa Simpsons of the world, who like learning, still think school is boring. That's you do occasionally get teachers who go above and beyond and who really do bring a subject alive as best they can. But truthfully, like it's always going to be more fun actually doing something than just trying to learn about it with a whole room full of people. If you're a person who wanted to optimize your learning for a day, I think that you might spend like an hour of that in a lecture. That there is like it is very like information dense having a lecturer telling you things, but that would be balanced with like 4 or 5 hours of doing anything but that. The lecturing and the classroom teaching would just be one facet of a sort of balanced education, I believe. But to bring you're right to bring up homeschooling, of course. But I think even homeschooling, a lot of people stick to like the curriculum, which is teaching you things, the geography syllabus, the history syllabus.
They don't. I think Lady of Shalott, especially, who's not in the comments this evening, I don't think, but we have had her on before, and I remember her touching on. For those who don't know, she does homeschool herself. But she homeschools her children. She doesn't. She doesn't.
We're with you.
She has touched on the fact that she still has to follow the curriculum. That she has to still follow what the schools teach, but she's able to do it in her own way. But because of that, she is able to make things a bit more practical. So, say they're learning science, she is able to show them certain things at home. But then they. If I remember rightly, if she is in there, correct me if I'm wrong. There was an hour, I believe, in the education where the parents could choose their own subject to teach the children. Now, I can't completely remember what she said that she was doing, but that is something that I really liked about the homeschooling, is that you were able to jump in and teach your children what you want them to learn and not what
I'm sorry to cut you short, Bertie, but I do. The baby started crying. We've been going for more than an hour, so I think we're going to have to call that a day. Sorry, you can finish your thought if you like, and I'll come and push the button when you're done. Do you want to just say goodnight?
Pretty much. Just summing up that parents should be able to choose what their children learn. But yes, other than that, thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Bertie. Thanks everyone for watching, and sorry for the abrupt end to this. Have a good night, everyone.